Okay, everyone. This video I'm going to be covering this thing that, like I say, it's been weighing heavy on my mind. Yeah, now that the cat's out of the bag and people realize, yeah, I'm not happy with what's going on with Maxime Bernier and the PPC. Well, now I'm going to be dealing with just another topic that bothers me a lot in regards to the policy of the PPC. And that's his support for bringing in 250,000 economic immigrants per year in this country. Which, like I say, if you understand economics, if you understand how things work as far as wages and how they've been stagnant in this country for 4+ decades, well, the reason why that is, well, there's a few contributing factors. One is the outsourcing of a lot of decent paying manufacturing jobs to emerging or third world countries such as China. That's one important aspect. But there's also another contributing factor, and that is this constant influx of people to assume these tasks, these roles or positions as far as employment in this country, brought from countries that, once again, are emerging or third world countries that have pay scales and compensation packages much, much lower than they are in Canada. So, you know, if your employer, well, that's the thing, an employer couldn't go out and pay all the extra costs they would need to bring someone from some other country, because, like I say, you'd have to have recruitment, you'd have to pay someone to go recruit, to travel across, oceans. There's a lot of expenditure that would go into going to countries all around to find workers to bring to Canada, right? So they would never be able to do that on their own. I wouldn't worry about that kind of stuff under a free market type of environment. But because they have government help, because government can actually cover all the costs by forcing the wage serfs, the employees, the working class of this country, to pay and subsidize their competition or these immigrants, because that's the thing. Who do you think pays for everything, right? The taxpayer. And who do you think truly pays out of all the taxpayers? Who pays a bulk or a large substantial bulk of all the taxes that pays for all this stuff? Well, it's you, the average Canadian, because, the connected class, the corporatists, the big government types, they've got all kinds of offshore havens, tax havens, or accounts, or ways where they can hide or stash all the wealth they've built up and not have to pay for any of this stuff. Shit runs downhill, and you as the average consumer or the employee, yeah, you're at the bottom of that hill. So the costs are ultimately going to be thrust upon you. So you're not just having to compete for even your domestic, Canadians, like all your people that you want to compete for a job as far as wages. Now you have to compete with people, like I say, that are coming from the country and given all the benefits of government paying to get them here. All they have to basically do is show up the door of that employer and look at how much already they've got as an added benefit, or that gives them a leg up or two over you. You might expect a particular wage that's up here, but hey, if they'll accept a wage down here, and even if they're remotely competent in their job, well, as an employer that has a profit motive, that's a business driven by profit, well, chances are if they can get the same or at least somewhat equivalent competency from an employee at a much lower wage rate, now they're going to go that route. And why wouldn't they? To them, that's a wise business or economic decision. And like I say, in the past, well, it was the TFWs, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. I mean, there's lots of government initiatives and programs, all, like I say, all paid for by the domestic wage slaves and tax serfs in this country, that's meant to prop up and subsidize their competition in the workforce, or even potential competition from, like I say, emerging or third world countries. That's a terrible thing to suggest. And like I say, as if these corporations don't already benefit enough, like they're constantly at the trough, and Maxime knows this. He's even talked about this stuff before. The corporate class in this country are constantly putting their nose in the trough of big government because they recognize that that's where they'll benefit. Why would they want to negotiate or bargain with employees for wages when they can just get the government to bring in people that will, like I say, compete to reduce their wage compensations? That's all a net benefit and a positive for the corporate class, but terrible, terrible for the average worker in this country. And like I say, just look at some of the historical precedent, and I'll share an article or two in it. But yeah, wages in Canada, take it from a Gen Xer, it's been basically stagnant. I could, with the purchasing power I had, making about $5-6 an hour in the 80s, in the mid 80s, even today making 3 or 4 times that amount, my purchasing power is about the same or a little bit lower. But think of all the extra productivity and increased use of my labor that has taken place as a consequence of all this innovation and technology. I'm not seeing the benefit. The corporate class, the government, The central planners, your rulers, they're all making out like bandits. But you as the worker or the end consumer, the only thing that you've benefited as a worker, well, you haven't really benefited as a worker because, like I said, you've seen your wages taken. The only thing that has even remotely offset that a bit is the fact that you can get a lot of cheap stuff from China because of their currency and the way it works as far as adjusting for the prices and the wages in that country. So you can buy a lot of imported Chinese stuff in this country that will help supplement or offset some of the losses that the corporate class and big government has been taking and slowly eroding from you over like all these decades. But that's not the same as actually getting a genuine wage increase where you actually increase your purchasing power. You're not seeing that at all. If you think about the things that you actually need, you can buy a lot of cheap stuff, right? Consumable goods that are fairly cheap, like I say, these China imports. But think about the stuff that you actually need. That roof over your head, right? The gas in your tank, your food that you need, right? To survive. We all got to eat. We all need a roof overhead. We got to all have like natural gas. We got to heat our homes. We got to have fuel in our cars and oil to keep them lubricated. All that stuff. Look at the costs and the increased inflation in regards to those things. The staples of everything you need. Well, those costs, like I say, have been on a massive exponential growth rate that's now far exceeding your wages. Especially if you're talking about in the last 10 years, since the Great Recession, the prices of all the staples that you need have taken off like a rocket, whereas your wages are basically, the glaring divide today within the last 10 years, it's terrible. And what you're seeing today is the only way people are trying to compensate and make up for the difference is by putting themselves further into debt or playing that extended pretend game by offloading their entitlements or some of that economic pain on the future and success of generations or the unborn. So no, I don't support Maxime Bernier and the PPC when they talks about bringing in 250,000 economic immigrants. Like I say, I'm sure the corporate class are like, thanks, Maxime. Love you for that, buddy. Awesome. 2 thumbs up. For the working class, that's like I say, that's a negative. That's a detriment to you and your economic prosperity. Maxime doesn't seem to be worried about you, though. And that's the thing. He called it the People's Party. If it's going to be the People's Party, if it's not the corporate party, well, then isn't it the people that should matter most? And it's the people, it's the working class that's going to suffer with this kind of initiative. And for those of you who might think I'm misrepresenting what Maxime stands for or what his policy suggests, well, this is straight from Maxime Bernier's website with a headline, reduce the total number of immigrants to 250,000 per year. Policy. Preventing our businesses from hiring the immigrant manpower they need with red tape is a big government policy. At the other extreme, mass immigration that would create social tensions and is not in the interest of Canadians is also a big government policy. A government under my leadership would find an appropriate middle ground so as to unleash Canada's economic potential. I would reduce the number of immigrants from 300,000 a year under the Liberal government back to 250,000 a year as it was on average under the Harper government. So once again, they're both like 50,000. It's a decent amount of number. I guess it's roughly around a little bit more than what just the illegals that crossed this border in the past year or so. So come on, not really that big of a difference. I mean, 50,000, it's a whatever number. I guess it's a number, but 250,000 a year, that's in 4 years, that's still 1 million people come in this country to compete for your housing, to compete for your jobs, and to compete for that limited space out on there on the roadways and the highways as you're traversing or commuting to those jobs, especially in the urban centers. Wow. Another aspect of this whole thing is the fact, and maybe some of you who haven't watched my past videos, maybe you're not aware of this, but people say that there's a labor shortage in this country. No, there's an incentive shortage in this country. Like I say, if the wages were paid in an appropriate or a proper manner that was a reflection of the cost of living in this country, a lot of these positions that are seemingly going unfilled would be filled rather quickly and in short order. Just look to the labor force participation rate to learn some of the underlying fundamentals as far as how many people are in this country that can fulfill these positions or these roles or these tasks. The labor force participation rate now is, believe, roughly around 64. But what that means is there's 35% of working age people in this country, which represents millions of them, that aren't actively participating in the labor force. So what are we to do with all these people? And the fact that automation is coming down the line and it's going to be something else we're going to have to front all those people in a lot of these jobs or occupations or positions. This bringing in of 250,000, like I said, this is a baby boomer problem because a lot of them are going into the retirement years, and people in government are basically trying to use this as a stopgap measure. Immigration is like a temporary band-aid solution or a stopgap measure to create enough, what they hope, economic activity to pay for the entitlements that are completely unfunded in the long term in this country. So they're hoping they can paint over all their past mistakes that is a direct result of big government, central planning, and unfunded liabilities or political promises made by many governments in the past. But like I say, those short-term measures, well, that's the thing with politics, right? They do everything in terms, right? 4 or 5 years. And then if they don't get elected and they are sent away or put on the backbenches or put as opposition, well, hey, all the mistakes they made, guess what? They don't have to pay for them. They never have to pay for them. You know who has to pay for all their mistakes? You. It will always and forever be you, the tax serf, the wage slaves, the working class in this country. So at the very least, like I say, you should hold any political actor or anyone that wants to be your leader, right, in this country. You better hold them to at least a higher enough standard where it's not just, benefiting you as far as tinkering around the edges, but it's actually respecting you as a sovereign citizen in this country who's been productive your whole life and wants to be rewarded rightfully so. Not based on entitlement, not based on forced wealth or income redistribution, but just based on market fundamentals and what you can provide economically in society. To give people from third world or emerging countries a leg up over you when you're already, especially like I say, especially if you're a typical white male, now you're already placed basically at the proverbial back of the bus today as far as government policy and the kind of rhetoric those in the media espouse. Basically, they're trying to suggest that socially and economically, you should represent the modern day Rosa Parks and get the hell at the back of the bus. That's what the ruling class and the media class is telling you today. And even though Bernier is coming along trying to give a little better message, and his rhetoric sounds better, when you dig right down into it, into the meat of the policy, a lot of it does seem quite superficial, sound good on the surface, but look a little bit ugly when you start digging down into it. So no, I don't support bringing in 1 million immigrants to this country over the next 4 years to fill these supposed positions that, like I say, there's already plenty of Canadians that can do that now. And they can be trained. I mean, we live in the age of information, folks. That's not something hard to do. And it's very much possible, and pretending otherwise is to suggest that you actually don't know how the actual world works around you. How about we get a large, substantial portion of those 30+% of Canadians that are sitting on their ass and not contributing to society? How about we see if we can't entice them or give them the proper incentives to get themselves into the workforce? Because not only will it benefit society at large, it'll actually benefit each and every one of those as well, because it'll give them some real meaning in their life. And ability to maybe start a family, maybe get that house. A lot of things that can be done for a lot of people today in Canada that are suffering needlessly. But it's not going to happen as long as these central planners are always going to be looking externally to try to fix domestic problems. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.